All right, folks, we are going to resume the conference with panel 2, moderated by Professor Hank Greely, and the panel is about quantum in life sciences and healthcare.
So, good afternoon. Hope everyone had an excellent lunch. My name, despite the name tag there, is not Hank T. Greely. I'm either Hank Greely or Henry T. Greely, and I can't convince some Stanford website that I'm not Hank T. Greely. So, Hank Greely, Stanford Law School. I actually know very little about quantum, though I'm beginning to learn about it. But I am here not in my role as somebody who knows something, but as somebody who can introduce speakers who do know something and try to keep them from killing themselves and killing you and you from killing them. And that's what moderators do, right? We moderate. So with that said, our first session is actually combined. Mateo, Aboy, and Timo Minssen are combining their efforts. Their 5 minutes each are becoming 9.84 minutes plus or minus 0.23, whatever the quantum-based confidence intervals are. And that will be followed by Vicky Ward and ending by Glenn Cohen. The plan is they take no more than 20 minutes combined, and then we open it up for discussion among the panel, and most importantly, between the panel and you. So, I am done. Over to Mateo and Timo.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm here to talk, and this is both of us, on the state of the art of quantum in the life sciences and healthcare. Now, what is the state of the art? This is a key foundational question for responsible QT scholarship. If we ascribe capabilities that are not there, perhaps we start thinking, oh, quantum computing is very dangerous. We need to regulate it. So it is key to really think about what's going on at the technology level and the technology layer when we are thinking about safeguarding, engaging, and advancing, and how to best jointly optimize that depending where you are at. So let's take a look. I'm going to go over research, invention, and then commercialization. In research, and there is a very good review article that I'm using here, that categorize really top 40 studies, peer-reviewed studies, where you have quantum applications in healthcare and medical. And the idea here is, okay, quantum has capabilities in simulating nature, you see it there, search and optimization, and processing data with complex structures. And then based on that, you can map them to application areas like clinical research, genomics, diagnostics, as well as treatment and personalized treatment. This paper, if you're interested in this topic, is highly recommended. You have the focus of the study, the reference, and the categorization either on simulation, biomedical signal processing, and search optimization, and the actual algorithm. Okay, so this was using the quantum Fourier transform or a quantum neural network, or any of the algorithms, Grover algorithm, for instance, for DNA sequence alignment. So highly recommended. It's a very good overview of where we are in the state of the art. But the conclusion is, you see these applications happening. That's encouraging. At the same time, they are very much experimental proof of concept stage. The technology readiness level is clearly 1 to 3. What about the invention stage? What is being patented? When you look at the patent landscape, there are still relatively few quantum computing patents where you have claims specifically directed to healthcare applications. Instead, what you see in the patent landscape is that a lot of the invention and the patents are very much still in the physical realization, enabling this technology, right? And the control or the error correction, very much indicative of a very early stage of development. Okay, hardware level, similar to semiconductor patents in the 50s, 60s, pretty much that stage. And this is quite important when you're thinking about governance frameworks. Okay, this is actually very different from AI. It's much more similar to semiconductors. Okay. Now there are some patents where you do have examples in healthcare. What about the commercialization stage? Well, you know about IBM, you know about quantum, you know about some of these cloud services like AWS bracket. It is instructive to look at the quantum only, and it's good that we have quantum hardware and commercial efforts. We looked carefully at the the quantum only public companies like Rigetti, IonQ, D-Wave. And if you look at how one thing is looking at the marketing materials, and you get a story from that. Another one is to look at their investor presentations. You get a slightly different view, and then the 10K report. So this is part of the investor presentation in Rigetti, and what you see is, okay, there are use cases, applications with NASA, DARPA, but very much they're still looking for narrow quantum advantage applications, and certainly broad quantum advantage applications. So what are we? Well, we are at this stage of emerging quantum advantage that is very much benchmark prototype applications, but little commercial value yet. The next stage of maturation will be narrow quantum advantage, and this is solving a practical problem in production workloads with improved accuracy, speed, or costs. And then the last stage will be broad quantum advantage. If you're thinking about this quadrant, it's easy to get confused. You see, oh, this is the literature, maybe then you see quantum advantage in the Nature paper by Google. Where are we? What you see is that the potential commercially valuable problems that you see now on quantum machine learning, optimization, and simulation, they are classically reproducible. And the ones that are beyond classical, like sampling, they have low commercial value at the current stage. So the search here is advantage-capable subroutines, basically do what NVIDIA did with the GPU, right? There is something that quantum does, and it has a lot of value for practical applications. Okay, what about the 10Ks? What are they telling regulators? Well, when you look at the 10Ks, and again, this is important when you're thinking about governance frameworks, the 10Ks, that they do a very good job about their quantum modalities, their risk, etc., is that typically they will include the fact that this very early stage, quite a lot of technological risks, this is deep tech, and that no current quantum computers, including their own hardware, has reached quantum advantage. This is Rigetti, this will be D-Wave, it is the same for IonQ. So, to conclude, at the fundamental and applied research stage, it is encouraging. You see research applications in the life sciences and in healthcare. Clearly, quantum computing very useful for scientific research, simulating nature, right? The next application potential in clinical research is drug discovery by using quantum simulators to model quantum mechanical systems, biochemical quantum biology. You see applications of quantum AI hybrids, quantum machine learnings, as well as quantum-inspired algorithms for biomedical signal processing, very similar to what you see in medical AI for medical imaging detection and classification. Encouraging. The invention tells you very early stage, and the commercialization tells you clearly the disclosures. These companies are telling you we do not have quantum advantage yet. We have to keep that in mind when we are applying the CL network, as well as the fact that they have very small revenues, profit is still far in the future, and that this is right now research equipment for scientific purposes. So, last slide. So what does this mean in terms of the responsible quantum technology framework, or in terms of safeguarding, engaging, and advancing? Well, my view is that at this very early stage, we need to place a lot more emphasis on advancing the technology itself, as opposed to just safeguarding for very long-range potential dangers. Timo?
+1. No, me and Mateo are very entangled here, so actually I gave him my slot so that we have more time to discuss this, and I think you made good points, and I think I'm more concerned about over-regulation right now and under-regulation in this area, because I think we also have to think really about what are the ethics of not engaging with the technology or not enhancing the technology also through regulation. And that also reminded me of the talk of Karina when she started, Karina Shu started to talk about the technology, how it can actually save lives probably in the future. And I think what we also have to do, we heard also a lot about double investments. You know, the good thing about patents is that it stakes the claims. You know where you don't have to dig anymore because somebody else has dug. But I also wanted to say that I think it's very important in the quantum arena to make sure that we invest wisely, maybe also build strategic networks so that we don't spill resources without any reason to do that. And that reminds me also, for example, of the dynamic dashboard that we have in the global R&D hub for antimicrobial drugs. There we see where the innovation is going, we see where the funding should go. We also heard how important the funding is in this area. And I think it is very important that we have it and maybe have a dynamic dashboard as far as it's possible with the information that is out there to really be smart in where we invest in this area. So I think we took enough time.
So time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had 29 seconds left.
Ah, right.
I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Vicki, you have 5 minutes.
I'm Vicki Ward. I am an associate professor in pediatrics in the School of Medicine, and I'm a pediatrician by training, so I work clinically in the Children's Hospital and take care of the sort of, as people say, the use cases of a lot of this technology in the future. And so we take care of patients who have very rare diseases who need drug discovery. We utilize MRI imaging and sort of all the imaging modalities that have future tense use of these technologies. And I think all of those bells and whistles we are very grateful for, but the majority of my job is actually taking care of people in very remote and hard to reach and very poor places. So as the medical director for Digital Medic, which is it's an initiative of Stanford Center for Health Education, we use cell phone technology for empowering people who don't have access to medical care. And so in that context, in very rural Kenya, we work with community health workers who take care of the majority of mother and baby care. As you might know, 85 to 90% of children who die under 5 die in very low resource settings. And so we think a lot about how do we use technology to put in the hands of community health workers a physician. So we use chatbots, we use AI technology, we use educational tools, job aids, to enable people to take care of mothers and babies so they don't die. A second use case, we have spent the last 5 years using metabolomic analysis to predict preterm birth. So as you may know, preterm birth is the #1 reason that babies die, and 91% of those babies die in low resource settings. So we spent many years collecting blood from babies so that we could then find biomarkers that would predict whether a mom would have a preterm baby. And the goal of this is to then have a very small microchip that people drop into a urine sample and use their cell phone to predict whether they're going to have a preterm baby and then be able to know what to do about it. And a third case in the Stanford Center for Human Trafficking Data Lab, which is one of our organizations here at Stanford for which I'm core faculty. We use satellite technology and remote sensing to find slave labor along the edges of the Amazon deforestation and the production of charcoal. And we use that satellite technology to find areas where slave labor is taking place. In charcoal production, it's very difficult and dangerous work, and oftentimes trafficked labor is used. But those operations are both transient and very remote, and they're hard to find. And so it's allowed to persist unfettered. But it turns out that you can identify it from space. And so we use that geospatial technology, big data analysis, and satellite imagery to find slave labor. And I think through the process of using risk analysis for supply chain transparency and identification of forced labor, we know that these technologies can have an incredibly profound impact on the benefit for people who really most need it. But I will also say that we spend a lot of time talking about equity and what are the equity impacts of these rapidly progressing technologies. And my sort of encouragement or my plea to everybody in this room who is deeply steeped in the use of quantum is to really think about how will these technologies either close gaps for those babies that die most frequently or rip open equity for people who don't have access to that technology, and focus on the incredibly profound benefits for it, the positive impact that people have talked about, but making sure that when we consider those equity impacts, that we really think about those who most need it.
Glenn, you have 5 minutes, and you've got 3 speakers who actually all went under time.
Wow, that's a challenge. Well, I want to start by quoting the band The Talking Heads, right, who once said, "You may ask yourself, well, how did I get here?" Right? So I feel very much that way, but both sitting on this panel, but in general, how we got here in terms of the conversation, which is to say, one of the big themes today might be RQT is great, and it's great to have that in your back pocket, but we don't quite need it yet because we're just trying to get, a plane that flies, let alone a plane that is regulated or thinking about how the doors come off in flight or the like. So one thing I think that's an interesting question is, what is the right period of maturity of an industry to regulate? Heard a little bit earlier this idea that the ability to pitch self-regulation is often a defense against full-on regulation. But one might also worry that self-regulation, if it becomes too kind of robust, is also an argument against regulation, right? So just to think about the maturity of the industry and how this fits in. The second thing that's interesting that I've heard today is what I'll call the parade of the analogies and the ways in which analogies can be used kind of in a constructed way, in a kind of advantageous way in terms of the argument that's being made. So is the current state of quantum like semiconductors? Is it like AI? Is it like gene editing? And in what respects is it like these things? In what respects do those analogies push us towards a certain conception of how responsible regulation can look like? Another question I want to put forward is this question about what, if anything, is special here, right? So we're law professors. I'm a law professor. Some others on the panel are as well. We like to kind of make the point, well, there's a really novel and important issue here, and it's really important that we focus on that novel and important issue. It's entirely possible there's not something novel, hopefully important, but there's not something novel here, and that could be bad news for the law professors, but very good news for everyone else, because it means that essentially we know what we're doing and we have ready-to-go models. And here I think this what, if anything, is special comes in 2 flavors. The first is, as to this panel, what, if anything, is special as to healthcare applications of quantum and life sciences as opposed to other spaces? And of course, when we touch patients, maybe we have a stronger precautionary principle. Maybe we think the organization of patenting and the ability to kind of assert intellectual property plays out differently here. But I'm not sure I've been convinced that I think the issues in the healthcare setting are so different anywhere else in quantum. But then there's also the question about whether there's anything special about quantum in general as compared to the way, so is quantum computing really all that different from other forms of computing, classical computing, when it comes to the regulatory perspective? Certainly in terms of performance, certainly in terms of speed, certainly in terms of cost, for example, absolutely different. But do we think there's anything distinct from a regulatory perspective? And I will say the one thing that I've heard today that has made me think that's kind of interesting and distinct is the point that was made in an earlier presentation about the ways in which LLMs could be trained on, quantum LLMs could be trained on much smaller pools of data. And to me, that perked up my ear because on the one hand, that sounds great from a privacy perspective to try to protect privacy. But on the flip side, when I think how bad the generalizations LLMs currently make, when you say the doctor did this and then he or she, it always puts in he, and when you say nurse, it always puts in she, right? The idea that the training data is already so poor in terms of the generalizations it generates. How does that play out when you've actually made it much easier to train on much smaller data sets? So that's a little bit about what I've heard today, and I'm curious to talk more to my colleagues.
Okay, great. Well, sort of the unprecedented situation of having 4 panelists all go under time, but that gives me a chance to ask a question to each of you, using up your unused time. Prediction, what will be the first really substantial healthcare effect of quantum computing? Okay. Mateo?
Yeah, so as I pointed out, I think that the initial applications are in quantum simulation of computational biology. So the application will be what is closest in terms of the science. That will be drug discovery, right? Screening and generating new drug candidates, doing more design, perhaps being able to check already bindings and potential secondary effects before going to trial. So all that significant promise, as well as some early results that are quite impressive. So quantum computing, useful for science. Drug discovery, very close to science, you have it there. And then you have the other applications that we saw. Those, I do not see that they are that different from machine learning applications. Okay, so you're applying quantum machine learning or a quantum spiral algorithm, and you are doing detection, classification, diagnosis, not that different. The applications are already there. You see them in the engineering journals. Good. They are proof of concept. They are not commercialized yet, but with a little bit better hardware, and especially when you are doing quantum AI hybrids, you will see them. That does not mean that you have a quantum advantage. It's that they are classically reproducible, but they are already useful.
So it's quantum is faster, cheaper, better.
Well, there is the other subset, right, where you have, I mean, ideally what these companies are looking for is applications that are commercially relevant, so they are useful, they have value, and there is a quantum advantage that over classical compute. That's really the goal for them. Think of analogies. Think about NVIDIA. NVIDIA is very competitive against CPUs for accelerated computation, scientific computation, AI, both training and inference. So there will be things like that, right? The idea is for specialized subroutines, you do want to do that the same way that we use an NVIDIA GPU to do that, you will use a quantum processing unit to do that. It's a coprocessor.
Because it's faster, cheaper, and better.
Yes. Okay.
Timo.
Well, I also see most of the applications in the quantum sensing and quantum simulation area, especially since we know that the step from gene to RNA to protein is much more complicated than we thought before. So in predicting protein foldings and predicting epigenetics responses or effects, I think quantum technology might help a lot in the health and life science area. And of course, I would like to add the framework that we need to drive innovation in the health and life science area might also be both endangered and enhanced by quantum technology, quantum computing, because you could have quantum safe encryption methods coming up, which might enable us to share data in better, more secure ways. At the same time, it's also endangering the current encryption technologies that we have, for example, homomorphic encryption in the data sharing with regard to the GDPR, for example. The data protection legislation. So we need to be careful there and step up, and maybe also make sure, because there are companies out there who store first and decrypt later, have this idea, or like bad players. So we need to make sure that we roll out these technologies at the right takt, as the German would say, the right rhythm, to make sure that things stay safe. But if we do that, I think also in the information exchange, quantum technology could help a lot, quantum computing.
Vicky?
I agree with drug discovery merged with precision medicine. I think also thinking through how we can use it for imaging. I think in the hospital we use our imaging studies for much of our diagnosis, and I think being able to advance that to a place where we can be much more thoughtful of how we use imaging, both for surgical planning for diagnosis and for identifying what's going on for patients beneath the surface. And then I think sort of a lot of what we do in the metabolomic arena is really trying to understand what are the signatures and the biomarkers that are predictive of disease. So we can take small aliquots of blood from mothers while they're pregnant, and we're working on predicting what will happen to their babies so that we can then prevent it rather than try to treat it later.
And Glenn.
I'm not sure I have anything different to say than anyone here, but I'll just frame the problem slightly differently in this way. I tend to think that we're unlikely to get something that's a distinctly healthcare application. We're instead going to get a secondary use of a non-healthcare application. Let me just say why I think that. It's because I think the cost curve here in terms of creating the technologies we're talking about is so high, and I'm not sure it's going to come down quickly enough that any of the healthcare applications strike me as being able to pay for it the way we pay for healthcare and the way reimbursement and the decentralization. So I think it's much more likely that something like quantum encryption is developed for another purpose and then applied to healthcare records rather than being the target innovation.
Mm-hmm. Drug discovery an exception?
You know, here I'll say that I think that drug discovery would, but even there, you have to imagine if you are going to invest a huge amount of, so I think it's likely that quantum computing drug discovery will provide services to large drug companies as opposed to large drug companies owning quantum computing themselves. That's just a kind of an instinct I have, but I'd be very curious to hear people who are much more informed in the audience what they think.
Great, thank you. Well, speaking of the audience, we have, I think, a half hour for audience interactions. Questions, comments, everything but rotten fruit and vegetables.
Just one quick question, though, one remark, if I may. Do keep in mind, though, in terms of the cost, because we have a cloud-based model, the costs actually are not that high. In fact, you are already able to prototype and play it, and it scales. It's similar to when you're thinking about the infrastructure that you will need, but for a startup, but you have access to AWS or Azure. It's like, well, actually, it grows with your use and your value. So that decreases the barriers of entry significantly. The fact that you have things like the Amazon bracket or the IBM cloud, okay?
The only thing I would add to that is we always need to remember there's a difference between cost and price.
Yeah.
The cost may be low, but the price may be high. Question there. We have microphones circulating through the room.
Hi, yeah, this is Greg Birkin from FTI Consulting. Question is about the HIPAA requirement for securing data. I've heard that the HIPAA timescale is 35 years to protect medical records. And you can imagine the quantum and AI threat to those records in that time frame. Are we, headed for the quantum medical apocalypse?
I can take that. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so remember, right, the risk of quantum computing to cybersecurity is the fact that we do have quantum algorithms already that can break RSA encryption, but we do not have the hardware, right? Now, at some level, that's good. We have time to, and we are developing, and there are already post-quantum or quantum-safe, quantum-resistance algorithms. So it's a question about doing that. Also understand that when we are talking about breaking encryption, we are talking about breaking asymmetric or public key encryption. So it is not all encryption also, right? It is in these communications where you use public key encryption. So compared with other risks in cybersecurity, the idea of store now and decrypt later, and the fact that NIST really is doing a pretty sound effort on post-quantum cryptography, and also that quantum can be used to enhance and harden against quantum attacks. It is a concern, but I don't think it is an apocalyptic. I mean, it's a managed risk. That's my view.
Glenn, did you want to add anything on that?
No, I think I largely agree. What I will say, though, is I think the public, like trying to communicate to the public what the risks are and also to understand data sharing in this respect, I think is very, very challenging, right? Because in general, so when you all talk, I barely understand, and I spend a lot of time reading the stuff you put out, right? So I worry about the rest of the world. And I think that if you ask me where to invest money, it would be on a quantum communication plan, right?
I will just second the quantum communication plan. I think we're very invested in keeping patient data and privacy at top of mind, and that's sort of our most important guardrails. But I think the utilization of the EMR-derived data, particularly as it relates to research and insights created because of it, have a long way to go with regard to communication to allow our research ethics boards to enable us to create very valuable research and great insights from that data. that the protections will need a lot of communication to start to address.
Well, even though I'm just the moderator, I'm going to throw in a note of cynicism. HIPAA, GDPR, all these great protections, and still data leaks. I mean, my data leaks, I regularly get notices that my data has leaked. And I don't know I don't think the problem is the fancy quantum or computing or other protections stuck in. The problem is the humans who use it.
Sure. And I mean, today, data triangulation is and data fusing incredibly effective already to get the data that you want to. The Google case, Dynastain keys, for example, case, if I think about that one. But I think, if you can't prevent it through regulation, then you have to think about how to sanction it if that happens. And I think there we have to become much harsher, maybe.
It was 1999 when the then head of Sun Microsystems, whose name I'm blocking on, said, "Privacy is dead. Get used to it."
Yeah.
And
rings a bell.
Scott McNeely, whose son turned out to be an NCAA winning golfer here at Stanford.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You're waiting for the microphone. You're well trained. Although your name tag is backwards.
Oh,
because
sorry.
That always happens.
Noah, nice to meet you. On the topic of a quantum communication plan, which both of you just voiced, and earlier, Professor Cohen, you mentioned, there all might be these applications in medical data, but really we're designing algorithms for quantum cryptography, and it won't be years until someone kind of bridges that gap. I'm curious to know is, legal professionals, medical professionals, highly educated in your own respective fields, how did you all kind of learn about the quantum space? Was it a simple Google search? Did you watch Ant-Man Quantumania and take it as gospel? Are you completely ignorant? And if there are no tools to really kind of connect you to what we do, what would you like to see? What could we create as physicists, as scientists, that would speak to you and your needs to learn about this technology?
Great question. Let's go, Glenn, and move in this direction.
So here's what I would love, would be a bridge from, so believe it or not, weirdly, the history of quantum physics and kind of basic ideas in quantum physics, like back to Heisenberg and the like. I think that's pretty fresh in my mind, and while the math behind it, like I'm reading a book about like matrix approach and the Copenhagen verse. So I find this interesting, but that stuff in some ways, weirdly, I find more accessible at the basic level of kind of the nature of the universe and why classical physics is wrong than the applied space. So I would love someone who's able to bridge the gap between basic ideas in quantum mechanics to the applied space.
Go the other direction. As probably the newest here to quantum, I instead of starting with quantum and then figuring out use cases, I have the closest proximity to what the needs are and have taken from that learning about how do we find tools and solutions for them. And so I would say from my perspective, from that sort of education perspective, we need to be very thoughtful about what does this actually mean in practice. And then the communication and the education comes from, if this is what you care about, this is how we get there. And then give the sort of education in that context, because that's to me where it's meaningful.
You also ask how we always came to that, and for me it was because I watched a documentary about the conversations between Einstein and Niels Bohr, and this skepticism that Einstein had, and also maybe he was a bit afraid of quantum phenomena at that time. And then I got to it because I read some of Moritz Kopp's blogs, and that's how we hooked up like 2-3 years ago, and we discovered that we had the same interest for music and these kind of things. So that's how I got into it, just to mention that. And then, I think we all need to train our scientists also not only in responsible quantum technology, but also responsible communication of quantum technology. And of course, we have to learn. We must invest in education in the area, which is very much the topic of the agenda in Denmark, for example. We have all kinds of events, town hall meetings, like the Reaching Out in Copenhagen to the schools. We also have a science day every year where we try to get out and talk to schools and so on about AI and quantum technology. And we do this sometimes together with lawyers and scientists who actually know more about the technology.
Is Bohr a famous Dane? I mean, is he a
Absolutely.
hero in Denmark?
Absolute hero. Yes, yes, yes. We're having seminars in his house where he lived and all these kind of things in his gardens. And yeah, he's a big name.
Yeah, so in my case, I do have a dual background. So although I do legal research and I have a doctorate and PhD in law, I do have also a PhD in electrical and computer engineering. And so I got introduced to quantum around 24 years ago. That was both AI, and that was classical machine learning, nothing of the generative AI, no architectures, and quantum information science. So back in 2022, the developments of the quantum algorithms were already, from a mathematical standpoint, very well developed. What you do not have was hardware. So you do not have implementations or the qubit modalities that you have now. With regards to learning about quantum, it depends what is your background and what is the purpose of that learning. So on one level, you may have, somebody with a bachelor's in, say, electrical and computer engineering. Well, they already know about matrices, etc. There are right now very good resources where in, say, 6 months, you can actually be developing in the IBM Q experience, for instance. That's one category. Another one is, okay, you're not an electrical and computer engineer, you do not know the hardware, but you are a software person. There are very good books right now about quantum computing for software or computer science professionals where you do not need to know all the physics, but actually you know the key algorithms, the key routines. It is great. You can, I mean, the industry has done a great job to have these resources from an access standpoint. You have open quantum assembly language that anybody can learn, is open. You have access to clouds for free to deploy. There are good courses, right? Even if you do not have background, if you go, for instance, to the IBM website, they have a whole curriculum from no background to start doing quantum simulation, doing some implementations step by step. And they have these open certificates. So, I mean, the situation is quite good, right? Even if you do not have any technical background, just with the materials that are publicly available by some of these companies, you can get a pretty good level of expertise. So I think that there are good books, good open source materials. You can do a lot of the coding in Python or open assembly language. The barriers of entry, I will argue, are actually quite low. That's my opinion.
I would just throw in the name of a book that, to the extent I know anything about quantum, an excellent British science journalist named Philip Ball wrote a book 6 years ago called Beyond Weird, which, to the extent I understand anything about quantum, I thank Philip Ball for it.
Yeah. Well, Quantum Computing for Everyone is a very good reference. You can read it in a week and you're going.
Yeah. And Ball is more the physics of it, like Glenn. I think I know that much better than the applications. Other questions? Yes?
Could you repeat the name also of the book you had mentioned? The Philip Ball?
Beyond Weird, Ball, B-A-L-L, Beyond Weird.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for speaking. My name is Jin He. I'm a student here of computer science and HCI specifically, and I had a question for Professor Minssen. Something that piqued my interest earlier was you said you were almost more concerned about over-regulation versus under as you consider quantum applied to healthcare, which to me at first listen felt a bit unintuitive because I feel like the need for incredible caution in the application of healthcare specifically. But can you say more about in what ways you've seen or are worried about over-regulation threatening the advancement of quantum computing applied to healthcare?
Maybe I'm a burnt child, as we say in German, because we have right now an issue with the EU AI Act and the European Medical Device Regulation in the AI field, which is presenting an incredible problem for small, medium-sized companies, for example, where the Europeans say we're best in regulation. What it means, like the big companies say, yeah, great, we're good in being regulated. but they also know that this is dangerous for the ecosystem because the small companies, they cannot keep up with these regulations. So maybe that's why I'm so careful in over-regulating, because it can also kill innovation in some areas. And I think we really have to think about more adaptive types of regulation. I don't say we shouldn't be cautious, but we should not regulate blindly. You know, we should make sure that we understand the matter. Of course, there is the principle of precaution principle, which we also have to think, and we have to ask us, we have to make hypotheses, what happens if we regulate, what happens if we do not regulate. Of course, we need to balance that, but I think we should be very careful in regulating too early. And then, think about this regulatory sandboxes, this kind of oversight principles, which allow for a little more flexibility to minimize the risk and enhance the potential benefits of the technology, because they are also enormous. So maybe it's just because of my European background and what we're right now facing, because I've just been at the World Medical Device Summit before I came here, where I heard all the medical device companies crying out that the innovation moves to the US and China and leaves Europe in this area.
We're down to near the end of our time. You in the back, sir. Should have picked someone closer to the microphone.
Thank you. Sujay Shivakumar from CSIS. Novo Nordisk is a healthcare company, but it seems to have an outsized influence on building the Danish quantum ecosystem. Could you describe a little bit about what it does and how it's doing it?
That's me again. What did you say? Who? Sorry.
Novo Nordisk.
Novo Nordisk, yes, deeply involved, yeah. They're having enormous investments into building the first quantum computer in Denmark. They are investing in education. They're investing in legal programs, as you can see here. It's a small country with huge companies, which is kind of the interesting thing. And it's not only the Novo Nordisk Foundation. We have the Lundbeck Foundation. We have all kinds of foundations. And so that is all I know right now. And they're also working very closely together with the Diana Quantum Center, the NATO Center in Copenhagen. And that is all I can say from here.
One small clarification. It's not Novo Nordisk.
It's Novo Nordisk Foundation.
It is the Novo Nordisk Foundation.
Yes.
So this is a not-for-profit. So the cap table of Novo Nordisk, a percentage of it is owned by a separate not-for-profit foundation and uses those resources to advance science, and has been doing that historically, right? So for scientifically independent research. And so, the funds the Quantum for Life, and a lot of, I think that right now the Novo Nordisk Foundation may be the largest foundation in terms of assets under management, above the Gates Foundation. So not-for-profit, scientifically independent research, not the company.
And most recently, they also have a lot of agreements with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Wellcome Trust Foundation.
And I was going to say, if you are interested in funding, it's great to have a Danish partner, because they like to fund in this space, but they particularly, I can say this, like to keep some of the funding in Denmark. So if you have a project in this space that you're looking for funding, meet some Great Danes.
Well, I'm not
the
even
dogs,
Danish,
the
I'm German.
No. Don't you do also? I don't know. So work in Denmark, Copenhagen. Meet great people in Copenhagen and elsewhere in Denmark.
We are running almost out of time, but I think we may have time for another short question. The real key will be short answers. Question. Somebody from this side of the room, and somebody on that side of the room. You in the midpoint and over. Somebody on this side of the room. Yes.
Is there a call to action for the general public, or do you think that most of the topics relevant to innovation and quantum tech is confined to people who are in the space already?
I'll say it's so I do a lot on medical AI generally, and I feel very differently about this discourse and where it is, and that I think people should be up in arms, people should be worried, people should be pushing. Whereas here, I feel as though maybe the best thing we can do is just to remind Congress that this is important and the like, but I don't think there's something to be worried about as an average member of society at the moment. That's my take.
Would you put a yet in there?
Maybe, yeah. Depends on how long yet lasts.
To that one, we have time for one more question.
I'll mention one point while people. So, and to the previous question about the regulation and the call to action is, if you're thinking about this framework of safeguarding, engaging, and advancing, and how you balance that. And ideally, you want to jointly optimize that. If you have a very early stage technology like quantum, you want to make sure that there is advancement of that technology. You want to make sure, yes, there are societal benefits, but even the technology itself, as an enabling technology, needs to be created. And if you put any hindrance on that, that's your major risk. Above the cybersecurity risk is that this does not happen. If you go to the 10Ks, the Securities and Exchange Commission documents of these companies, that's actually identified as the major risk. The major risk is deep tech. We are not able to realize this because there is not enough investment, the technology is misinterpreted, etc. So I think it's a technology with a lot of potential. A lot of it is already demonstrated in proof of concept. Ideally, I mean, it will be great for the world to have this technology, but we are at a point where advancing is key. I mean, we can think about safeguarding with a long-range thinking, but that would be my call to action.
I'll just add on the call to action that I think in this early period of development, those multidisciplinary conversations, thinking about where this goes, are most important, both with a keen eye on who could ultimately benefit that really need it, and also who might be left behind. So really making sure those conversations are multidisciplinary.
Well, the technology may be in its early stage of development, but this panel has reached its sell-by date. So please join me in thanking the panelists for this presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for an amazing panel. We have a 10-minute interlude and coffee break, and see you back at 2:20. Thank you. These are the colors of infinity, beat synced to human and machine created music with you, the audience, as input data. You can think of it as fractal geometry, as fractal geometric art, as a metaphorical secret code of creation, long hidden for its complexity, a message built into numbers, a God equation. The infinite complexity of the visuals can be overwhelming for the unexperienced eye. If you feel it's too wild, especially the neon ones, just close your eyes for a moment and listen to the music. I find it a great tool to arouse my brain and ignite creativity beyond daily sensory experiences. So you'll subconsciously recognize the shapes as nature uses fractals in its workings, in DNA, in plants, in animals. Our body's organs, arteries, veins, our brains, mountains, clouds, planets. Iterative combinations of chaos and predetermined form. And the apparently random forms that exist in nature, and they trigger a resonance in the brain. Fractal formulas bring order to chaos. Fractal geometry, as an extension of Euclidean geometry, stands at the basis of the code, the numbers and algorithms, the visuals before you run on. It deals with how things are shaped. Fractals go to the infinitely small, down to the Max Planck length, to the quantum level. And my intuition tells me these fields are connected. In fact, fractal geometric patterns have recently been discovered in quantum materials, complete with eccentric, paradoxical behavior. And the material in question is neodymium nickel oxide, a rare earth nickelate that can act as both an electrical conductor and insulator, depending on its temperature. And a new theory called holography is the idea that there are different descriptions of our reality besides Einstein's general relativity, suggesting that there is a deeper theory of our experience of the world that does not have space and time in it. And beyond the legacy way of processing information classically, we found a new method, a new computational paradigm, a new way of reasoning, quantum information science. And this new way of reasoning is so powerful that many are convinced it's the very logic behind the future of our universe, behind the fabric of our universe. And quantum processes are the ones on which nature at the subatomic level works. Take photosynthesis using quantum coherence, or quantum biology that studies the hidden nature of nature. Even space-time is expected to be quantum. So how is quantum physics related to fractal geometry? Quantum states are mathematical entities that contain probability measure, a prediction of the knowledge, the information in a quantum system. Fractal geometry, as showcased by these visuals, is related to the transition interface of quantum state to classical state. That transition bridges the large and the small, as in a continuum. It seemingly connects the unorthodox quantum world with the classical relativistic Newtonian physics world. So fractals are applied in many of the same fields we are seeing second generation quantum and quantum AI hybrids being applied to. Healthcare, defense, data science, metrology, chemistry. And I can see many parallels in many dimensions, both in art and in societal application, which must be further studied in interdisciplinary settings. Both languages can be used to describe our universe as instruction sets, as maps that are the treasure. And what I am certain of is that quantum and fractals, chance and predeterministic laws can live together. They are compatible. So back to our fractal cosmos on the screen. The marriage of mathematics and art gives birth to the mesmerizing magic of fractal art in an endless series of motifs within motifs. And my creative machine visualizes infinity at all scales while producing dynamic art beyond verbal description, representing musical notes as locations in space. And it runs on the same NVIDIA GPUs as generative AI. Nature has chosen fractal geometry as a technical help in accomplishing its goals, as a semaphore of the physical world, how it tells itself how it's supposed to be. And the human brain might have cells that handle fractal complexity. We can activate those by ingesting fractal art as we sit here today. Fractals correspond with our mental setup. Now, concluding, how does art inspire science? By integrating art into science, we better understand the interrelatedness of everything we learn. Art enables scientists to point abstract ideas in tangible form. The ability to visualize and imagine is important to solving scientific problems. Lateral thinking is the ability to imagine solutions that cannot be arrived by through logical means. The essence of creativity. Art inspires serendipity to discover things you are not looking for by chance. In the post-truth era, we need revolutions in thought, accomplished in symbiotic, interdisciplinary environments. Let us call here at the Stanford RQT conference for bringing transformative creative approaches into scientific practice as a guiding principle for organizational and cultural development of the university. Thank you.